AVD networking is one of those topics that sounds complicated. And to be fair, a lot of the diagrams that I've seen people create around it make it look even worse. You'll see environments with multiple firewalls, a hub and spoke topology, inspection layers everywhere, and a level of complexity that looks impressive on paper, don't get me wrong. But then you actually talk to the users and something feels off. Logons are slow, the session feels laggy at times, and troubleshooting becomes harder than it should be. And that's the problem. In AVD, more networking complexity doesn't automatically mean better outcomes. In a lot of cases, it does the actual opposite. So what I want to do in this video is strip this right back and talk about what actually matters when you're designing networking for Azure Virtual Desktop or AVD. Not from a diagram perspective, but from how the systems behave in the real world. The reason networking becomes such a strict point in AVD is because it sits in this strange sort of middle ground, right? On one side, AVD simplifies things. You're not dealing with traditional RDP exposure. You don't need inbound ports opened in the same way, and the control plane is handled by Microsoft. That removes a lot of the pain that existed in those sort of older RDS environments. But on the other side, your session hosts are still just Azure virtual machines at the end of the day. They still need to talk to the storage, the identity services, application endpoints, and a lot of other parts of your environment. So the networking layer still matters, it's very important, just not in the exact same way it used to. And this is where people tend to misjudge it. Right, they either assume it's all handled and don't think about it deeply enough, or they go the other way and try to rebuild all that sort of complexity they used to have in on-premises VDI, just inside Azure. Neither approach works perfectly or particularly well. If you ignore everything else and just focus on one thing for AVD networking, it should be this. Latency matters more than anything else. Not topology, not segmentation, not how polished your diagrams look, alright? Latency is what determines whether the desktop actually feels responsive to the user or not. If your users are connecting to hosts that are too far away, or the network path between them and the session host isn't quite clean, the experience will never ever be right, no matter how well everything else is designed. This is why your starting point should never be, what network design are we using? It should be, where are the users and where should the workloads sit to give them the best possible experience? If you get that wrong and you end up trying to solve a fundamentally physical problem with architecture, it's never quite going to work. Another big issue I see is people designing AVD networking like it's still traditional RDP or remote desktop protocol. In older environments, you had to think heavily about the inbound access, gateway layers, expose endpoints, and all the sort of complexities that came with securing that as well, right? AVD changes that model. The connection from the session host is outbound. Users connect through Microsoft managed endpoints, and the actual session is brokered in a very different way to how RDP used to work. So when people start introducing sort of unnecessary inbound patterns, additional routing layers that traffic doesn't need, or even security controls that don't align to how AVD actually communicates, they're effectively solving problems that the platform has already solved. And in doing that, they often introduce new ones. What you want instead is a design that works with how AVD behaves, not kind of against it. Right? The cleaner and more aligned your design is to the platform, the easier it is to operate, and the more consistent that experience is going to become. This is probably the most uncomfortable truth in AVD networking. Right? Most environments are more complex when they need to be. It's very easy to justify complexity as well. Right? You can always point to security or segmentation or enterprise standards. Right? Those things matter, but the question you need to keep asking is this adding value to the workload, or is it just adding layers? Because every additional layer is going to introduce something different, right? Another hop off at traffic, or another place where latency can creep in, right? Or maybe another dependency that can fail. And another thing you have to understand when something goes wrong. At small scale, you can get away with that, right? Enterprise scale, though, it compounds very quickly. The best AVD environments I've seen aren't the most complex ones. They're the ones where the network path between the user, the session host, and the service the host depends on is as direct and predictable as possible. That predictability is what makes performance consistent and troubleshooting manageable. One of the biggest oversights in AVD networking is focusing only on the session itself. People think in terms of can the user connect to the desktop? And if the answer is yes, they move on. But the desktop session is just one part of the experience. Okay, as soon as the user logs in, there are multiple things happening in the background. Okay, their profile is being loaded, applications are actually initializing, data is being pulled in as well, services are being reached. That means your network isn't just supporting a connection, it's actually supporting an entire environment. If profile storage is slow to respond, the logon feels slow. If application endpoints are inconsistent, the session feels unstable. If identity calls take too long, everything else feels delayed. So when you look at networking, you need to think about the complete flow of data, not just the connection path. This is why networking, storage, and identity are tightly connected in AVD. You can't optimize one in isolation and then expect everything else to feel right. Security is usually where networking complexities start to escalate, right? And again, security matters a lot, don't get me wrong. But there's a difference between securing an environment and over-engineering it. What tends to work well in AVD is focusing more heavily on identity and access controls rather than trying to push everything through increasingly complex network inspection layers, right? If you're relying on strong authentication, well-defined access policies, clear user segmentation, then your network security design can be much more aligned and focused. The issue comes when every piece of traffic is forced through multiple layers of inspection, without even considering the impact on latency and behavior. Right? That's where environments start to feel slow or inconsistent, even though everything looks secure in design. Right? So again, it comes back to balance. Security should strengthen the design, not fight against it. One thing that becomes very obvious once you've worked on a few large AVD environments is this: simple designs scale better. Not because they're basic, but because they're easier to understand, easier to operate, and easier to troubleshoot. When something goes wrong in a complex environment, you spend more time figuring out where the problem might be than actually fixing it. In a simpler environment, the path is clearer, the dependencies are fewer, and the solution is usually faster to identify. When we're talking thousands and thousands of users, the difference really does matter, because it's not just about building the platform. It's about keeping it healthy over time. And the simpler your network design is, while still meeting requirements, of course, the easier that becomes. If you take one thing away from this video, it should be this: AVD networking is not about building the most advanced or most detailed architecture. It's about building a network that behaves well. And what that means is low and consistent latency, clean, predictable paths, and minimal, unnecessary complexity. Get those right, and the platform does what it's supposed to do. Overcomplicate it, and you'll spend more time managing the network than delivering an actual service. In the next video, I'm going to walk through how to actually troubleshoot performance issues in AVD, specifically where to look first when users say things feel slow, because that's where all this comes together, right? Look, if you want me to keep these sort of conversational deep dives going, let me know, and I'll keep building them out. Also, I really appreciate everybody's support, so make sure to continue supporting me by liking the video, dropping me a comment, and also hitting that subscribe button, because I obviously started my channel again. I'm trying to grow it. It's hard work, harder than what I remember, but it's still going quite well, so thank you for your support. Before this last video that I just mentioned, where I'm going to go about troubleshooting, I'm going to drop a couple of certification videos as well, so keep an eye out for those. And you might as well just smash that notify button as well, so you do not miss any of my content. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.